There comes a morning when the world quietly drains itself of color. Nothing catastrophic happens. The sun still rises with mechanical loyalty. Coffee still smells like burnt earth. The clock still ticks with mathematical indifference. But something inside you has unfastened itself from existence. The world continues. You do not. You answer messages. You show up. You laugh at the appropriate intervals. You nod in meetings. You function. And functioning becomes the performance that hides the collapse. That is the cruelty. No one sees it. You can be disintegrating internally and still hear, "You look great." Society applauds those who conceal their own implosion. We reward composure, not truth. We admire resilience, not honesty. Exhaustion rarely arrives screaming. It seeps in like mold behind wallpaper. It spreads across the architecture of consciousness until breathing itself feels like labor. And then the question appears. Not dramatically, not with fireworks. Just a whisper. What if I didn't have to keep going? That question is not madness. It is not moral failure. It is the brain attempting negotiation with unbearable pain. It is biology under pressure. It is the nervous system searching for relief. It is the accumulated weight of memory, disappointment, chemical imbalance, isolation, trauma, comparison, and silent grief reaching critical mass. This is not a conversation about cheap hope. It is about something more uncomfortable. Sometimes continuing to live feels irrational. Sometimes existence itself feels like an error in logic. And yet, staying alive may be the most radical act available to a human being. The human mind is the only place where something can rot without bleeding. If you break a bone, the body announces it. If you burn, the skin testifies. But when thought itself decays, the suffering becomes invisible, clean, socially acceptable. You keep paying bills. You keep replying to emails. You keep showing up to birthdays. The more you function, the more people assume you are fine. Civilization rewards silent endurance. It calls it strength. The psychologist Edwin Schneidman once wrote that suicide is not a wish for death, but an escape from unbearable psychological pain. That sentence remains one of the most accurate diagnoses ever written. The problem is rarely the desire to die. It is the inability to live inside a mind that will not stop hurting. Severe psychic pain is not mere sadness. It is the collapse of internal coherence. It is when the brain loses its ability to generate meaning. The future stops being possibility and becomes threat. Even neutral events feel hostile. Neuroscience confirms what philosophy suspected. Prolonged stress reshapes the brain. The amygdala becomes hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex loses regulatory control. Perspective narrows. Thought loops tighten. This is not weakness. It is physiology under siege. Deep suffering distorts scale. Guilt becomes enormous. Fear becomes omnipresent. Memory becomes weaponized. Everything is too close. There is no distance between you and your thoughts. No oxygen between impulses. David Foster Wallace described it like being trapped in a burning building. You don't want to jump. You simply cannot tolerate the fire. Outsiders call it fragility. But extreme suffering is not moral. It is thermodynamic. Energy overloads the system. The psyche seeks the fastest path to equilibrium. Modern culture tries to treat this with slogans. Stay positive. Choose happiness. Everything happens for a reason. But reason collapses when the brain itself is malfunctioning. Willpower is powerless against a system-wide shutdown. Silence, then, becomes survival. The quiet of the suffering person is not surrender. It is defense. When the noise inside your own mind becomes deafening, the only refuge left is stillness. No other animal contemplates its own annihilation. This is uniquely human. The capacity to override instinct and reject survival. Philosophy has circled this fact for centuries without fully facing it. We speak of freedom and autonomy, of rational agents making choices. But the moment before self-destruction dismantles these theories. In that moment, thought fragments. There is no grand decision, no cinematic clarity, only contraction. A narrowing of consciousness so severe that alternatives disappear. Psychology calls it cognitive constriction. The field of awareness shrinks. The mind loses access to long-term thinking. The present moment becomes absolute. Without psychological distance, there is no freedom. What appears from the outside as a deliberate act is often a collapse of deliberation itself. The moralistic illusion insists that choice remains intact until the final second. But where there is no stable self, there is no real chooser. The suicidal act is not the triumph of will. It is its demolition. And here lies the tragic paradox. What looks like the ultimate assertion of control is often the final reflex of a system that has lost control. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood something unsettling. He argued that even suicide is an expression of the will to live. It is not a rejection of life itself, but a rejection of intolerable conditions. To end pain is still, in a distorted way, to seek relief. It is inverted hope. There is something profoundly human in that distortion. It means that even at the edge of annihilation, the organism is still searching for peace, not for oblivion, for rest. That difference matters. Human beings do not know what to do with time. When we are happy, we try to stretch it. When we are suffering, we try to kill it. We oscillate between wanting permanence and wanting disappearance. Consciousness is the scandal. We crave meaning, yet we know none is guaranteed. The void does not resolve. It must be inhabited. Jean-Paul Sartre once said that life begins on the other side of despair. It sounds poetic. It is not. It is diagnostic. Only when illusions collapse does reality become visible. When you have nothing left to protect, you become strangely free. Modern society does not allow this stage. It medicalizes every form of sadness. It markets productivity as cure. It converts existential crisis into a branding opportunity. Lost your job? Reinvent yourself. Heartbroken? Glow up. Depressed? Optimize. We have created a culture where suffering feels like personal failure. The result is a new layer of despair, shame for not being well. This is where philosophy becomes survival equipment. Friedrich Nietzsche proposed amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive acceptance, but radical acknowledgement. The willingness to say, this pain is also mine. He did not romanticize suffering. He recognized it as inevitable. The waiting room, the silent Sunday afternoon, the aftermath of an argument. These are not empty moments. They are confrontations with reality. Meaning is not discovered. It is constructed. And construction is slow. One more day is not optimism. It is an operational decision, a philosophical stance. It means continuing without guarantees, remaining without cosmic reassurance. Albert Camus wrote that the real hero is the one who continues living even when logic no longer justifies it. The modern hero does not carry a sword. They get out of bed, and sometimes that is enough. It is not love alone that sustains a person. It is belonging. The sense that somewhere your existence is not an inconvenience. The philosopher Martin Heidegger described the human being as thrown into existence. We arrive without consent, no instructions, no map. From that moment forward, we attempt to justify being here. Many who collapse do not do so from lack of love, but from exhaustion in trying to earn it. Isolation is a slow amputation of the self. Aristotle warned that a person cut off from community is either a beast or a god. None of us are gods. Data supports what ancient thinkers intuited. Suicide rates correlate strongly with social isolation. Connection does not solve problems. It dilutes them. It distributes the weight. A voice on the other end of a phone line can interrupt catastrophe. There are other pillars. Competence. The feeling that you can affect the world in even the smallest way. Repairing something, cooking a meal, writing a paragraph, planting something in soil. Agency restores presence. Autonomy matters too. Not grand independence, but direction. The ability to choose something, however small. These three elements, connection, competence, and autonomy, form the structural beams of psychological stability. Remove one, the structure strains. Restore one, the ground begins to reappear. Continuing to live is less about heroism and more about craftsmanship. Small acts, small contacts, small decisions. Philosophy is useless unless it fits inside a body. A human being standing is a human being in relation. Every person is a survivor disguised as ordinary. We move through routines while internally rebuilding collapsed architecture. There is no stable form, only adaptation. The ancient Greeks understood ethos as character formed through repetition. Not belief, not inspiration, repetition. Continuing is not glamorous, it is stubborn. Time, indifferent and relentless, erodes everything. But erosion is also transformation. What feels unbearable today becomes memory tomorrow, and narrative the day after. The mind does not erase suffering, it reorganizes it. Cracks are not defects, they are structural adjustments. Japanese kintsugi repairs broken ceramics with gold, making fractures visible and precious. The object becomes more itself through damage. The psyche works similarly. Trauma can deform. It can also deepen. Not because suffering is good, but because reality is non-negotiable. Existential philosophy suggests that authenticity emerges when we accept mortality as constant possibility. Not as threat, but as boundary. To live well is not to eliminate the abyss. It is to walk near it without surrendering. The Romanian philosopher Emil Cioran wrote that life is bearable only when we do not overload it with meaning. There is something mystical in that emptiness. When expectations dissolve, presence sharpens. Breathing becomes an act of quiet defiance. The sacred is not fireworks. It is survival against probability. You are not broken. You are under construction. The fracture is not evidence of failure. It is proof that you have endured pressure and remain. Light does not enter despite the crack. It enters through it. If this theme resonates personally, and especially if these thoughts feel close to action rather than reflection, speaking to someone immediately matters. A real voice in real time can interrupt what philosophy alone cannot. Staying alive is not a romantic gesture. It is a rebellion. And sometimes, rebellion begins with nothing more than one more day. There are days when staying alive does not feel noble. It feels mechanical. You wake up not because you want to, but because your body refuses to quit. Your eyes open. The ceiling is still there. The air still moves in and out of your lungs. And for a moment you wonder why. Not in a dramatic way, in a tired way. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep does not cure. It is the exhaustion of carrying consciousness, of having to think again, feel again, endure again, to participate in a world that did not pause when you broke. Most people will never know how much strength it takes for some of us just to remain, to answer a message when your mind is imploding, to show up to work when your thoughts are corrosive, to sit at a table full of laughter and feel like a ghost pretending to be solid. And yet, here you are, breathing. That alone is not small. We live in a culture that celebrates visible victories, promotions, transformations, comebacks, but it rarely acknowledges the invisible war, the decision to continue when there is no applause waiting. Sometimes the most radical act is not changing your life. It is refusing to end it. There is something quietly sacred about persistence without witnesses, something deeply human about enduring without certainty. You may feel fractured, inconsistent, tired of your own mind, but the fact that you are still here means something. Not in a cosmic destiny way, in a statistical way. The odds are brutal, biology is fragile, circumstances are indifferent, and still you remain. That matters. This space, these videos, these reflections, exists for people who feel the weight of being alive. Not to offer plastic optimism, but to sit honestly with the discomfort, to name the thoughts most people are afraid to say out loud. If you've made it this far, you are not just consuming content. You are participating in something quieter and more important, a shared resistance against silence. And that is where belonging begins. If these words have met you in a dark hour, if they've given shape to something you couldn't articulate, if they've kept you company for even a few minutes, then you are already part of this. Simply watching helps more than you realize. Every view, every comment, every share tells the algorithm that this kind of conversation deserves space. That depth still matters. That honesty still has an audience. You being here is not passive. It sustains this. But if you ever feel that this channel has given you something meaningful, clarity, companionship, language for your chaos, consider becoming a member. Membership is not just a badge. It's a way of saying, keep going. It helps keep this work independent, thoughtful, and unfiltered. Members often get early access, exclusive reflections, and a closer connection to the ideas as they're being shaped. And if membership isn't for you, the Super Thanks feature is another way to support a specific video that resonated with you. Think of it less as a donation and more as a quiet nod across the room, a gesture that says, "This mattered." But hear this clearly. You owe nothing. Your presence is already valuable. Watching, sharing, returning, reflecting. That is support. Still, communities are built not only by those who listen, but by those who choose to invest in what they believe should exist. If this space feels like yours, help protect it. Not out of obligation, out of belonging. And whether you decide to support financially or simply continue showing up, thank you for being here. Staying alive is hard. Creating spaces for the ones who struggle to stay alive is harder. But together, it becomes possible. One more day, and then another.